All right, ladies and gentlemen. So, Unit 6, the Gilded Age, 1865 to 1890. I will explain what Gilded Age means. So, Unit 6. We are halfway through U.S. history already, at least in this class. So this begins the second half of U.S. history. Yes, sir. Nope, this is actually quite long. It's a lot of stuff happens right after the Civil War. A lot of stuff happens after the Civil War. This is going to be a good 3.5 weeks of lecture. It's a pretty long unit. Pretty much, we're going to end the semester with the Gilded Age. It's a lot of stuff, folks. We'll explain why. But again, the Gilded Age, from 1865 to 1890, we're pretty much arriving at the turn of the century. We might even pretty much hit 1900, but to be conservative, I just say 1890. Excuse me. Section 1, National Politics in the Gilded Age, is what we're going to be talking about this week. Just so you know, you have to write this down, but just to let you know where we're going in this unit. First unit is going to be about the Gilded Age and politics. Second part of the unit is going to be about the rise of industrial America. So different kinds of factories and improvements, different kinds of businesses. Third section is going to be about the growth of society and cities. This is one of my favorite parts because you'll see a lot of modern inventions that you guys are familiar with today. I'll bring a lot of those in. And then section 4, the Great American West, we're going to talk about, again, moving further westward. What's going to be a major theme in this unit, you think? Capitalism, greed, money. What else is going to be a major theme in this unit? Immigration, citizenship, what's going to happen with that? So we'll talk about a major wave of immigration happening at this time. What you'll be noticing at this time, folks, is we're going to be talking about, again, a group of individuals who will attempt to take over the United States government. What are they doing here, folks? They're making Uncle Sam walk the plank. These individuals will be known as trusts. Trusts are like large corporations and how the large corporations will slowly take over the U.S. government. We're also going to talk about individuals like John D. Rockefeller. What do you think he's going to do? He's almost going to use America like it's his own piggy bank. And here he is using oil to help power his industries. He's going to be an oil baron. Again, here he is taking over the country. Again, so Standard Oil, this company, will take over the country. Also, you're going to talk about political corruption in this unit. We'll talk about political corruption and how that's going to change society. We'll talk about child workers and how children will be entering the workforce and the roles they will have to play. So the role of children in America. We'll also talk about the rise of industry. Again, you'll see the rise of different new factories. Talk about the rise of skyscrapers in America. So again, we're going from like 2-3-story buildings to like 10 and 20-story buildings. Women attempting to get the right to vote again and failing. They won't get it yet. It's 1890, 1920, 30 more years. We'll talk about those living out west and what do you do when you have no wood to build a home? You build it out of dirt. And we'll also talk about the Native Americans. I mean, what happened to those guys? Where are they now? And how is America going to continue dealing with them? And we'll talk about Native Americans. So, folks, let's talk about the Gilded Age. The term the Gilded Age was coined by this guy. Who's this guy? Mark Twain. Mark Twain called this time period the Gilded Age. And the Gilded Age refers to the superficial glitter of wealth, is how he referred to it. He referred to it as the Gilded Age because it stood for the superficial glitter, like arts and crafts glitter, the superficial glitter of wealth in America. Again, Mark Twain called this the Gilded Age, referring to the superficial glitter of wealth in America. Now, what do I mean by that? So when something is gilded, what does it mean to be gilded? Does anyone know, like gilded flowers? No. Yeah. To be like almost like dipped in gold. Like to have this allure, like this image of wealth, okay? So let me explain why he called this age the Gilded Age. Things looked good, economically, politically, whatever else. Things looked really good. The economy was growing. But did that mean that every single person was benefiting from it? No. In fact, folks, the best example I like to give every year is this. Suppose I had a piece of poop. I'm going to dip that in gold. Now, it's a gilded piece of poop. It's gilded. Now, does it look good? I mean, hey, it's a piece of gold. But deep down inside, is it still a piece of poop? Yes, it is. And so the idea is, it's the same notion of this time period. It looks good. Economically, the numbers are great. But if you look at the core of America at this time, it's not really that great. I mean, the numbers were fantastic. What's happening to the U.S. economy? It's growing. You have new technologies like, better railroads. You have new cameras and typewriters, both of which I'll bring in for you during this unit. But we're going to have these new inventions and things look amazing. The problem is, while some people are getting very, very rich, what's happening to the most of America? They're getting very, very poor. And so while things look great, as you can see in this left image, real America is actually looking much, much worse. And we're getting poorer and poorer as the rich get richer and richer. Make sense? That's why we call this the Gilded Age. By the numbers, it looks fantastic. From a distance, America looks great. But when you really investigate what's happening to America at this time, it's really quite terrible. Or at least not as good as people assume it is. The question is why? Why do we have a Gilded Age? Why does America seem so slow, backwards? It's because there's this notion of a laissez-faire government, or a limited government. Does anyone take French here? Does anyone know what laissez-faire means? Not entrepreneur. Laissez-faire is literally in French, it means to let it alone. So a laissez-faire government meant to have a do-nothing government. A government that does not get involved. A government that is limited. The belief was that the government's only role was to deliver the mail and defend the country. A few other roles, but that's it. So should the government be responsible for education? No, that's not the government's responsibility. Should the government be responsible for the cleanliness of food? No, that's not the government's responsibility. Imagine, folks, if let's say I was selling hot dogs and I was putting poison in my hot dogs and people are dying. Should the government pass a law that says you are not allowed to put poison in your hot dogs? No. According to laissez-faire government, no. You know why? Because let's say 10 people die from my hot dogs. Are people going to keep buying hot dogs from me? No. Eventually, they're going to stop. And so, did the market take care of the problem itself? Did society deal with that problem of poisoned hot dogs on its own? So, did the government have to get involved? No! Why does the government have to get involved? Society will take care of problems. Hey, this company is paying really low wages. Should the government force that company to increase their wages? No! Instead, stop working for that company. And that company over time will say, oh my gosh, no one's working for us. What should we probably do? Increase wages. So rather than the government getting involved, they said the government should do nothing. Have a do-nothing government. Have government as small as possible. Does that make sense, folks? Is that very different from the government right after the Civil War? That abolition government, that radical Reconstruction government? Well, guess what, folks? That government, they're tired of all of that. They don't want to deal with Reconstruction anymore. And so that government is slowly fading away. Well, let's talk about who's part of that government. The best example of that government is occurring in 1868. We've talked about this election already. But in the election of 1868, the Republicans nominate Grant and the Democrats nominate Seymour. Horatio Seymour. Good so far? Easy stuff. Now, in this election, The Republicans, their campaign included two pretty common slogans. First off, wave the bloody shirt. When the Republicans campaigned, Grant would wave the bloody shirt. And when he waved that bloody shirt, he was trying to remind people of what? The Civil War. Saying, hey, you know those Democrats? Those Southern Democrats? Remember what they did. They killed so many lives. So he would wave the bloody shirt to remind people of the Civil War caused by the Democrats. And he also said, vote the way you shot. Hey, if you try to fight the South, you should vote as a what? A Republican. And if you supported the South, then who cares? No one likes you. But again, wave the bloody shirt. The idea being, hey, remember what the Democrats did. They seceded. They caused the Civil War. And vote the way you shot. If you fought for the Union, vote Republican. Make sense? Good? Okay. So wave the bloody shirt. Vote the way you shot. Well, President Grant becomes president, of course. And his administration is known as the era of good stealings because he was pretty corrupt. Or Grantism, which pretty much just means presidential corruption. It's like the era of good feelings, but this was the era of good stealings. Try to be clever. It's called Grantism, which means presidential corruption. Again, you have to be pretty corrupt when they name it after you. So, Grantism. Like Kingisms, for example, are like when you do awesome things. Like, you see I make that shot? Like my Kingism? Amazing. Or if you do something really smart, it's a Kingism. I kinged that test. That's what people say. We'll do that. Anyway, Grantism means presidential corruption. So let me explain what he did. There are several incidences of corruption during his administration. The first is the Gould scandal led by Fisk and Gould. Fisk and Gould. Let me explain what happened here. Fisk and Gould bought lots of gold. They bought a lot of gold, pretty much cornering the gold market. Okay, pretty much they controlled the gold market. When you buy a lot of gold, what happens to the price of gold? It goes up because all of a sudden there's less and less gold in the economy. Now, when the price of gold goes up, is it going to be difficult for regular folks like you and I to buy gold? Yes. And so President Grant considered releasing more gold into the economy. Okay, so they bought all the gold, and President Grant considered releasing gold into the economy. Because what would that do? It would lower the price of gold to something that's manageable, that's normal, that's fair. But Fisk and Gould, I think it was Gould, who was married to Grant's sister, said, hey, don't release more gold. Just keep it high. And so Grant didn't release gold because Gould told him not to. And then people began to buy more and more gold because they thought the price of gold was going up and up and up. And what happened to the price of gold? It went up and up and up and up and higher. And eventually, when the price of gold got really, really high, what did Fisk and Gould do? They sold all their gold. And did they make a lot of money? They sold it at that like $160 price. And what did that do to the price of gold right after they sold all their gold? It dropped it way back down. Now here's the problem. Fisk and Gould bought it like $40, but they sold gold at like $160. So did they make a lot of money? The problem is not with them. They made tons of money. The problem is for who? The people that bought it that was over for it. Like people that bought it at $110 and people that bought it at $120. Are they going to lose money? Yeah, because that price is likely going to go back to $40. And can I sell my bar of gold now for $50? 60, 70? No. So Fisk and Gould, they cornered the gold market. Pretty much they caused gold over speculation. They caused gold over-speculation, or gold speculation, ruining the economy. But did they make a lot of money? Now the question is, was Grant in on it? Like, did somehow Grant know that they're going to make a lot of money?
No.
And Grant was like, I had no idea. I'm like, okay, well then you're an idiot then. Because you shouldn't have listened in the first place. So either Grant was an idiot, or he was corrupt. Either of those are bad. Okay, so either way, it's not good. But everyone good so far on the gold scandal? Next one. The credit mobilier scandal. Here's the next scandal. Here's what happened. The government, they hired Union Pacific to build a railroad. Okay? And Union Pacific, they subcontracted out, or they hired Credit Mobilier to build the railroad for them. This is normal practice, folks. This happens all the time. Like, the government wants someone to build the internet, so they hire IBM, and IBM hires, like, Mr. King's telephone company to put the wires up. Does that make sense? So again, the government hired Union Pacific to build the railroad, and Union Pacific said, hey, Credit Mobilier, build the railroad for us. Make sense so far? The problem is, Union Pacific and Credit Mobilier are the same company. They hired themselves. Now you might think, well, that's fine. What's wrong about that? Well, here's why, folks. Suppose you wanted me to fix your computer. You say, Mr. King, I'm looking for someone to fix your computer. Oh, I'll take care of that for you. So I say, I'll find someone to fix your computer. So you give me your computer, and I say, Sebastian, how much does it cost to fix this computer? And you're like, $200. I'm like, great. It's going to cost $200 to fix your computer. Or I can say, Mr. King, how much is it going to cost to fix the computer? Oh, I think it's going to cost about $1,000. Oh, $1,000? Oh, yeah, $1,000. It's going to cost $1,000 to fix your computer. When really it only costs how much? $200. But I got told by some other guy that it's going to cost $1,000 to fix your computer, so you're going to have to pay me $1,000. And what am I going to do with the rest of that money? Pocket it. So pretty much what happened here was that Union Pacific hired themselves, and they inflated the cost of construction. They charged an inflated cost, saying, let's say the railroad only cost $1 million to build. Credit Mobilier said it actually cost how much? Like $3 million to build. And what did Union Pacific do with that extra money? They kept the money for themselves. And the government said, why does it cost so much? Oh, because Credit Mobilier said it would cost $3 million. When really, they were telling themselves it was going to cost $3 million. Anyway, they inflated the cost and they kept the profits. So that's already bad because they're stealing money from the government. But here's where it gets worse. They bribed congressmen to make sure that it was kept a secret. So they say, hey, don't investigate us. Here's $1,000. They began to bribe congressmen to keep it quiet. Even worse, not only did they bribe congressmen, they also bribed the vice president. So the vice president was also involved in the Credit Mobilier scandal. So the question has to be asked, wait a minute, did Grant know about this? And in other words, I had no idea. So one, he's lying, or two, he's an idiot, because how could he not see all of this going on while he was president of the United States? His own vice president was involved. That's not good. Questions there? We'll find out. Third, the whiskey ring scandal. The next scandal he had to deal with. Well, Grant and his vice president dressed up as whiskey barrels and robbed banks. No, that's not what happened. What they did was that government officials would steal whiskey tax revenue. So government officials would steal whiskey tax revenue. They would steal whiskey tax revenue, or money from the whiskey tax. And the people stealing the money included his personal secretary. They were stealing whiskey tax revenue or whiskey tax money. Pretty much they were stealing from the government, saying, oh, no one's going to notice this money missing. So they would take like $100 here, $2,000 here, $500 here. And all these people were stealing, including his personal secretary. I don't remember the person's name. But again, how could Grant not know if his personal secretary was involved? Do you think she was like giving Grant money on the side too? Maybe. Or maybe he just didn't know because he was an idiot. Fourth scandal, the Belknap scandal. Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Pretty much all you have to know is that Grant's Secretary of War, sold cheap products to Native Americans and kept the profit. He sold cheap stuff to Native Americans, or gave cheap items to Native Americans and kept the profit. So suppose I was supposed to spend $5 per each Native American on shoes. What did I do instead? I spent like $1 on Native American shoes, and what did I do with the rest of it? Kept it for myself. But I told people it cost $5. So again, Secretary of War stole money as well. So is this government pretty corrupt? I would say so. Anyway, don't worry about this guy. So, eventually, in the 1876 election, Rutherford B. Hayes gets elected. He's the next president. We already talked about this guy. Just note to yourself again that all this stuff happened under Hayes. Yeah, he's the 19th POTUS. We have this stuff already, but just re-note what he did as president. Hayes-Tilden Compromise, ended Reconstruction, removed the military. I don't know if I told you guys this, but Hayes is the only president without a mouth. He has no mouth. Why is that stupid? How do you know? Based on the evidence.
Has he ever done any speeches, like, verbally?
Yeah, have we talked about any speeches given by Rutherford B. Hayes?
Has he?
For all you know, I'm telling the truth.
How do you know you're telling the truth?
Maybe he has no mouth. Evidence, prove me wrong.
Alright, I'll prove you wrong.
Prove me wrong. Prove to me he has a mouth. Because the evidence suggests otherwise.
How's he going to eat food? These guys start with that.
What? Maybe he just took it intravenously.
What's that?
IV. Through the nose.
Well, that
Happens.
was very good.
Good? Questions? Comments? No? Almost done here. So, what's happening in post-Reconstruction South? How are the blacks doing in the South? Not so good, right? Are they dealing with Jim Crow laws?
Yeah.
What did that mean? Segregating the blacks. What else are they dealing with in the South?
The black codes.
Black codes are taking away their rights. What else are they dealing with in the South? What groups are they dealing with? The KKK are problematic as well. So again, blacks are certainly suffering following Reconstruction because the South kind of ignored them. So again, you have Jim Crow laws, black codes, the KKK. They are not doing well in the South. But specifically what we're going to end the class period with today is this conversation about how they restricted black voting rights. After the end of Reconstruction, they decided, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're not just going to intimidate blacks from voting. We're literally going to make it as difficult as possible to stop blacks from voting. So the first thing that they did was they established literacy tests. And what did they require?
You had to be literate.
What does that mean? You had to be able to what? Read and write to vote. You had to be able to read and write to vote. Why is this going to be hard for blacks? Because they're not educated. Why aren't they educated? Because they didn't let them get educated. Why didn't they let them get educated?
They want to decrease black people in the politics.
Yeah, they didn't want to educate blacks, right? They thought they would rebel, whatever else. And so, were slaves allowed to be educated? No, so it's not their fault they're not educated. But are they going to use that against them? Yes. By the way, I love these two cartoons. Shh, quiet down, folks. education qualification. The black man order be educated afore he can vote with us whites. What is being suggested by this cartoon? That poor whites aren't educated either. But does that matter? No, it's about literacy tests for blacks. And also this other cartoon. Voters take literacy tests here. By the way, what's the big word? Literacy? What's that mean? Literacy. What's that mean? So again, are whites educated?
No.
Not necessarily, but they don't care. Other fact, let's say you could read and write. Because could some blacks read and write?
Yeah.
Sure. So they said, fine. If you want to vote, you can read and write, great. But we're going to pass poll taxes. And what did that mean? You had to pay to vote. Is that going to hurt a lot of blacks?
Yes.
Why? Because many blacks were poor. They didn't have any money. Also, who else is this going to affect? Poor whites. Poor whites will also be affected because many poor whites can't vote. So again, if you can't vote, too bad. And so all these people can't vote because they don't have any money, and only the wealthy can really vote. But did some blacks have money? And did some blacks read and write? So they said, hey, some blacks can read, some blacks can write, some blacks have money, so let's pass another law called the Grandfather Clause. And the Grandfather Clause said, if your grandfather couldn't vote, you can't vote. You know why, folks? Folks, look, you have to have a tradition of voting in your family. I mean, like, how do I know you're going to vote the right way if your grandfather and your father didn't vote? You need a good upbringing of voting as part of your culture. So the idea was, if your grandfather couldn't vote, you can't vote. And who is this going to affect? All of them. Why would this affect all of them? How would they know? Because you were a slave. I mean, could slaves vote? No. So, could any of them vote? No. But some people say, hey, I'm half white, and my grandfather could vote. So there were a very few exceptions. So let's say you got past the literacy test. Let's say you got past the poll tax. Let's say you found a loophole and you also got past the grandfather clause. Well, hell, folks, we'll just kill you. So that's how it worked. So the best way to look at it, let's say you were black. Well, if you want to vote, you got to get past the literacy test first. Then get past the races. Then get past the poll tax. Then get past the KKK and get past the grandfather clause. But if you can get past all of that, well, we might just lynch you. Versus, if you were white, you just went right up and voted. Very different voting experiences for whites and blacks in the South. Very different. So, did many blacks get fed up with this?
Yeah.
Many did, and the last thing you should note today is that because of poor conditions in the South, many blacks decided to leave and move west. These are known as the Exodusters. These are blacks who left and moved west. Many of them moved to Kansas, but they're called the Exodusters because the root word of this is what?
Exodus.
What does Exodus mean? It means to leave, right? Exodus. So again, Exodus are people that are leaving, moving west, because why stay in the South if we have no political rights? Cool? Okay. That's it for today, folks.